Let's see. Should WoW ditch add-ons? 51 minutes, bro. Why is it so long?
For our final WoW,
Short answer, yes. Long answer, depends. Yes would be for add-ons that are assisting you in completing hard content. Depends if the UI just makes the game easier and more makes you more aware of stuff that are happening in game,
topic then. The add-on debate
such as cooldowns, your rotations, things like that.
has really popped
I
up.
don't mind
And it
those
basically
add-ons.
just all came from Yoshi P, where he was talking about just their own stances in the FF14 team,
We'll
which
cover that shortly, don't worry.
yeah, but it popped up. So Scripe basically said that look, a lot of the simple tasks handled by the power of add-ons would be quite fun to do as a player.
Yeah.
True. There's raid fights and stuff like that. They're just more fun without add-ons.
I have a very big example of this, which will lean into me playing some Savage and going through some Savage mechanics. But I thought of very specific versions of.
It's very different though. Like, you can't compare Final Fantasy fights to WoW designed fights. And it's like, yeah, the fights are designed with add-ons in mind, I get it, but like all the Final Fantasy fights for the most part are dance fights. It's a stand here, like, you know, what do you call it? Position A, everyone spread like this. Position B, everyone in. Position C, like go here. Position D, it was like whatever, right? It's like it's all a dance, for the most part in the Savage raids, as far as I've seen, and almost none of the WoW fights are dances.
I know what I've done in this fight, and I know if I had something telling me where to go, if I didn't figure out where to go myself, I would not have enjoyed it. So that's a.
How much did you really figure out in P1S? There's almost no figuring out. There's like, I think there's one mechanic that you actually need to pay attention to figure out where to go. Everything else is already like, you have two formations for the streetlights, whatever the crystals, whatever they're called. I don't know what they're called. Fucking the red and the blue thing. Hot and cold platforms, whatever you want to call them. I don't know their name. That mechanic is pretty much, you know beforehand where to go. The only time you need to figure out where to go is in the second phase, like in the second platform, where you have the red and blue circles. Like you have the two big circles, and there's red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and then the outer circle has red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and you have to figure out where to stand when, let's say, he lights up red and he has his chain going in a certain direction. You have to figure out where to stand. I'd say that's the only part that is like, you actually have to think. Maybe everything else, pretty much you know where to stand with P1S. It's really not. And honestly, similar with P2S, you kind of already know where to go. It just depends on like the marker you get for the water push. On that, you pretty much know where to go. The boss basically tells you where to go. I don't know. It's all a dance. I don't think it really matters. Will it make the learning curve easier? Yes, of course, but like, it won't work with WoW, because WoW literally has random shit falling in random places multiple times
That's something
that
they've really
needs to
talked
be
about in
soaked
FF14
or whatever.
But
yeah,
Completely different
Scribe
game.
did say that a DPS meter adds a lot of value in the game. It should be part of a baseline. And he clarified saying it measures whether you are, what you're.
I think if you want to go the DPS route, if you're using this for clarity here again, DPS meter measures whether what you are doing works or not, different talent specs, rotations, tactics. It allows you to test different things and figure out what's the best thing to do, and also measure your improvement. Yes, I agree. Here's what all your DPS meter needs to show you: one thing, your damage. That's it. There's no reason for a DPS to show anyone else's damage. Now, maybe that would have been more acceptable by OCP, but a DPS meter where it compares damages, I don't think is very good. It's not as good or bad. I think it has more negatives than positives.
Was that? I think that one was in it. Was that the one in a reply to me? I forget. I tweeted it.
knows, yeah.
Anyway, basically, like so one of the points that I made as a response was like the DPS.
Okay, he does mention it. The meter doesn't have to show others' stats in pogs, but definitely should in guild groups or raids.
Right, because like you really feel your progression. Back when you were fire mage and you needed grit, you needed a stat. You would very much in your gameplay feel your gear progression.
But they've removed that from so many of the classes.
I can understand why for scaling reasons, but you know, still, of course, you got more haste. You feel better, happy.
Yeah,
it's the end of Legion. You have RSI.
Yeah.
Now for so in those times where you kind of don't have that very obvious feedback, I do think it's good that as the weeks go on, you always remember going higher as a combination of your gear upgrades and also your just being more comfortable with the fights and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then Scribe coming in with the other side of it, though, is that a DPS meter is, of course, allowing people to measure whether their current setup of talent spec, stuff like that, is working. It lets them test things, figure out what to do as well.
Yeah.
Another reason you don't need it in WoW is because you have the Simcraft. So we don't need DPS meter if you have Simcraft. The other thing I would say that DPS meter, the reason you really don't need it in Final Fantasy is because you do have the way to test your DPS against a certain boss without being there. So you would know if you have enough DPS for a boss by being able to beat the NPC's target dummy. Right? If you can beat the NPC's target dummy, you have enough damage. Now you have to be able to do that damage while you're in a fight. So once you're able to do the damage to kill the boss, you don't need any more. Like, you can experiment all you want, and you can just go to that doll and experiment and see if you're beating your time or not, right? That's another way to measure your DPS. It's not that big of a deal, right? Is it easier to have a DPS meter over that dummy? Yes. But is it needed? No. By far, you don't need it.
And a meter doesn't have to show others people's stats in pugs, but it definitely should in guild groups and raids. I agree with all that.
Yeah, it's awkward because it's like having the information in pugs is still useful.
It is.
But it's like, is this useful enough on general to warrant? Because there's definitely times you have someone in your group and they're doing like pitiful damage and you need to kick them to succeed. That is like really unfortunate, but it does happen in raids.
It does.
And that's the thing where like, if that still needs to happen.
See, but that's the kind of stuff in Final Fantasy you're gonna get banned for or like punished for. The thing is, what I think should happen for Final Fantasy 14, in order to do the next boss in Savage, you have to beat the dummy. If you can't beat the dummy, you can't go into the raid, and that's it. Because right now it's like you might have the damage for P1S, but you don't have the damage for P3S. And even the damage for P2S, you have it, and you don't have the damage for P3S. You need to show that you have the damage by defeating the dummy. Like, there should be, in my opinion, that extra benchmark. The NPC for those dummies needs to be near the NPC that opens up the next raid tier for you. So for example, you finish P1S, you have to go to talk to the NPC. Hey man, I finished P1S. Oh my god, excellent. Let's talk about your P2S. The story needs to go on. We need to make the story more extravagant. Whatever, like the whole thing that they're doing with the progression of the raid. It's a whole story, right? Of like you telling a story of how the fight went or something like that. So it's like in Savage is like an exaggeration of the fight. So all you gotta do is right there. It's like the NPC to test your damage should be right next to the NPC that gives you the quest, and you have to finish that if you want to do P2S.
And the game doesn't actually allow that, then people will just use add-ons for it, and that's kind of the problem you always run into. And it's like it's really hard to get around that, so I have no idea. I don't know what the answer
and
is there, to be honest.
In FF, because in FF, the downside of having one player is really bad.
Yeah.
It's kind of made up for in many situations by the combat res system.
Yeah.
Right, which means you can extend a fight a little bit longer to
Yeah.
make up for your lack of
DPS
in a way.
Which is still going to run into problems whenever you reach extremes in Savage with enrage timers.
Well, in that case, I think that's going to happen less because it's like your average heroic player is better than your average normal player.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, low DPS doesn't matter very much in like story content. It's just in harder content. That's where it's going to be a little bit of a problem. But no, that's certainly an interesting problem. But I don't know if there's any real solution, to be honest. But it's like, oh man, it's very difficult.
And a lot of people are just like, you don't like add-ons? Don't use add-ons.
Yeah, don't be fucking.
Yeah, but that's
To
dumb.
which Scribe says, saying you shouldn't use them if you don't want them is like saying don't do split runs if you don't want to.
Yeah.
You have no choice if you want to be good at the game. The lack of understanding for these things leaves me baffled every time.
Yep.
Of course, doesn't justify whether it's good or bad to have add-on split runs, whatever. I'm just seeing the argument way too often. Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of, like, yeah, you eating Nestle chocolate, bro?
Not good for you.
You drinking bottled water?
Yep.
God, you must have a slate of terrible attributes. You know that thing,
I do,
right?
but that's not do with this.
Where, like, people don't engage with the core of, like, the actual thing that's being discussed. They just go straight for it, which I've noticed a fair bit with add-ons, and really a lot of noise on this issue.
Yeah,
Like, it's funny. I was away on holidays
Yeah.
in France since like Monday midday, and I think
Tuesday midday.
Tuesday midday.
Tuesday.
It was Tuesday. See, when you do more things in a week, the week feels longer. It's fucked up.
Yep.
But yeah, so I do that, and I kind of just pull the lever on Twitter, so to speak, maybe once or twice a day while I'm away, and I just see ongoing battles, just ongoing fights.
It's great
Between people. Like, fucking hell, this website's free. Just gotta look at all these people fighting. Incredible. Like, there's times I go to my notifications and I could have like 15, 25 notifications and it's just two motherfuckers fighting.
Yeah, I love it. I love the I mean, I hate it because it's like,
I'm not
obviously
talking shit to any of the people doing that, but certainly if it gets to that stage, it's just some rando on Twitter. Put your phone down. It's okay. It's okay. The war won't be lost. But just funny. I think with this add-on thing, it's not just about add-ons though. It's really about FF14 versus WoW. There's now so many dimensions
Oh my
to
God.
it. People got so fired up. It's crazy. It's very funny to watch.
Yeah, it's like it's such a major like shift. But I think it's people who won't stop and think about second and third order effects. It's people who go, well, add-ons are fine, just player freedom, bro. You're like, yeah, but what does that player freedom impact have on the design of the game going forward? And they're like, sorry, my brain doesn't stretch that far. Or, maybe they're just going, I don't fucking want to think about that. It's like, well, if you're not going to engage with the entirety of the conversation, if you're not going to engage with the entirety of, like, the, I guess, debate, what the fuck you want to call it. What do people, the fucking discourse, that's the term people use now. If you're not going to engage with it fully, maybe step back whenever you're talking shit. But I don't know. It is very fucking, it's been a fun week. I've enjoyed it. It's been frustrating, but I've also enjoyed it. Oh, God. But yeah. Brutal.
Oh dear, yeah. So it's an interesting thing. Oh, we got time.
Not weak auras. The World of Warcraft would be substantially worse without weak auras and add-ons. I understand that some weak auras can be too powerful at times, but those should be targeted as opposed to deleting weak auras or delete add-ons, or make the base UI have something similar to weak auras. Weak auras, honestly, okay, so substantially worse. I don't agree. There needs to be a clear indication of your cooldowns. That's I would say majority use of weak auras outside of raids is like your UI and letting you know that cooldowns are back on. If the base UI would show you the cooldowns are back on, I think the game would already just by default be better. As far as, let's say, PvP, you need weak auras too. I mean, in my opinion, WoW PvP is a fucking dog shit, so I don't really care about that. And as far as PvE goes, the mechanics are being made with weak auras in mind. So
battles, WoW would be substantially worse without weak auras and add-ons. I understand that some can be too powerful at times, but those should be targeted as opposed to deleting them or deleting add-ons. I take particular issue with the assignment, weak auras feeling required for some raid encounters like Jailer, but in general, almost all accessibility weak auras should be fair game.
I agree and I don't agree. I mean, first of all, what do you consider as accessibility? I'm assuming he's talking about cooldowns or something like that. I'm not talking about like the cool stuff you can do, like when you're dead, the Lich King comes and like beats the shit out of you while you're dead, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that's not what he means by accessibility. But as far as like the cooldown management and stuff, the game needs to do better at telling you that cooldowns are up instead of having weak auras tell you, or like if something procced and stuff like that.
There'll be issues there with some accessibility ones. Well, if you kill one, you might, the collateral damage.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I suppose.
Here's I was going to talk about this a little bit later in terms of FF, but I might as well talk about it here because it makes sense. Freedom to express information and the accessibility of information. There is a point where accessibility overlaps with making something easier, because it's all like, obviously you look at World of Warcraft, you go, obviously having your buffs in the top right's fucking pointless, right? But then it's like, if your buffs are easier for you to read and easier for you to see than someone who's playing with the personal nameplate display, personal resource display, the game is easier for you by that metric.
Yeah.
It doesn't make your decision making easier, but it reduces like latency from you seeing what's there. And to me, that is like, that's kind of fair in the realm of UI stuff, because we've always had that in World of Warcraft. But if you think about that from the perspective of someone playing like say like a Sekiro or something, right? In Sekiro, you've got basically I can't remember correctly, but at least two types of like unblockable things that have like an information display above the enemy, where there's one of a kanji appears above. I can't remember which is which, but one of them denotes a sweep, and the other denotes a thrust. When the enemy sweeps, you have to jump it because you can't block it, you can't parry, you can't do anything about it. But when they thrust, you can, if you have the Makiri counter ability, you can dodge into it, and then you'll step on the thrust like from the spear, and then counter. And it's like that comes with a sound effect and a thing above the enemy's head, right? If that thing was, instead of being the kanji, if that wasn't at something that was way bigger in the middle of your screen and clearer to read, that would be easier. Yeah. And that's information displayed in a different way that's more readable, making something easier, giving you more time to react. And that's where like difficulty comes into it in a weird way. And it's like, talking about this in World of Warcraft's information is clearly not designed that way, because they've relied on add-ons for so long. So you're like, yeah, fuck it, it's clearly designed to be difficult and shit, but add-ons have solved that problem, so that's okay. It's like I guess another example would be the interrupt timers for M+. Without those, it's really hard to coordinate who's got an interrupt.
Totally.
Yeah. The game is really like it's made with the add-ons in mind at this point. It's like, if you're gonna remove the add-ons, you have to lower the difficulty of all the fights by tremendous amount. Not just like the numbers of the damage, like the delay on like the cast speed of attacks, stuff like that. You're gonna have to do a lot of work if you want to remove the add-ons. They can only do it with like a completely new tier. Like they can do it with Dragonflight, they won't. They can do it with a completely new tier, which they won't, because then the previous tier will actually probably feel harder than the current tier. Like, I would say probably a new expansion is the only time they can actually address the add-on issues.
But with those, you get to see.
But the thing is, at this point, I don't even know if they can barely develop a raid design properly without nerfing it to shit after all, like taking add-ons into consideration. I can only imagine what would happen if there are no add-ons and they still can't do the raid, like design the raid properly.
Information that you shouldn't be able to see otherwise because it's querying player stats.
Blizzard evidently designed knowing that that's a limited resource.
Yeah.
And there is an understanding that players will be able to manage that resource.
Yeah.
So therefore it's kind of designed around it.
Yeah, so that's this like informational gap that's way better for people with this information. It's like, oh yeah, well that information is technically available, or you can technically talk about it, but then it's kind of, if you have it, you're literally better. and that's the stuff that's very difficult to kind of for people to think about in terms of the very like detailed mechanical perspective of what part is difficult, what's not. It's like, oh, just information, bro. You're like, yeah, but the information's like the speed of you seeing that information's the difference. I think, and that's certainly something else to think about. But that's where accessibility and difficulty kind of overlaps again. It's like, well, this is fucking difficult because what do you do with a visually impaired player who needs a big debuff? Then that's where the line gets really blurry and no one has a right answer because no one, and rightfully so, no one's willing to say, sorry, those people are at a disadvantage because they can't see as well.
And the tricky thing is this is a multiplayer game with competitive elements.
Yeah.
Like, let's just say that The Last of Us Part 2 is now an esport. Quite shocking if that happened.
Yeah.
Oh my
but
God.
a lot of accessibility features that are vital for some people to be able to have a great experience of that game.
Yeah.
They would be turned on by the esportsy people.
Yep.
And it's an interesting problem to grapple with.
Yep.
Right, and I check out The Last of Us Part 2's accessibility options. Actually, all the Sony first parties,
shooters,
they're incredible.
insane. Was it Spider-Man's? I think was absolutely mind blowing for people.
And there are some that even a normal player may want to tweak, per their individual preference.
And that's the part where some of that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man has ways to really like, I think it's like an outline of like an enemy versus an ally, so you can make enemies really easy to spot at a distance.
For some people, that makes the game more fun.
Yeah.
I have an example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was built as an accessibility feature in the
you
game.
talk the aim assist on
Yes.
Uncharted? Yeah.
The aim assist in Uncharted.
Yeah.
Look, Naughty Dog don't have great gunplay.
I'm not gonna lie. Aim assists for controller shouldn't be a thing. The only reason it's a thing because controller is so much worse than keyboard and mouse. And I'm gonna get a lot of hate on this if anyone ever sees this video in the comments. The reason people say, oh, but controller is so much better because I can sit on my couch, get a fucking wireless mouse and keyboard. You'll be fine. However, aim assist and controller is fucking bullshit. And the only reason it's a thing is because you can't aim as well as you can with a mouse. And that's it. So another reason why, by default, mouse and keyboard are better. Now, I don't know if Uncharted has aim assist for keyboard and mouse. That shouldn't be a thing either because aiming with a mouse is just so fucking intuitive. It's like, it's not even a problem. And if you can't aim, like, practice, get good. Fuck, like, I don't know what to tell you.
No.
Right? So, but they do have fun movement. I think because it's pretty good movement, but it's all animated and stuff so well that it feels quite weighty. So if you're playing Uncharted 4 with the aim assist on and you're just really focused on movement, that actually makes for a really fun experience that just totally moves it to be less cover shooter, more Indiana Jones, and that's way more fun.
Yeah.
But of course, also for people maybe with, like, say, some fine motor control issues or something, that aim assist would be an absolute godsend that would allow them to play that game.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's more points pointing out that Spider-Man has an option to turn off the button mash QTEs, and well, this is maybe a different thing. I'll maybe talk about it a little bit later. But I really hate button mash QTEs the way they feel.
Same.
But they're way better in essence than holding the button, and that's because it's a different form of input.
Yeah.
And you're hitting that button, and the act of you actually hitting that button hard, sure, could result in RSI, sure, accessibility issues. But that being the default means you're going to be pressing that button. You're going to be trying harder to physically do this thing. Sure, it's not difficult, but you're there actually mashing, as opposed to just holding the button. And I think that's like
I'd rather
one of the
button
really
mashing
small
over
differences
holding.
that I think kind of people don't think about too much. But that's maybe a different fucking kettle of fish entirely.
We've got then some more comment from X now, World of Warcraft developer Jeff Hamilton.
Oh yeah.
Says, yep, these tools do a great job of letting players express what information they care about and helping the game give them the information in timely and meaningful ways, and everyone gets to define what's meaningful to them because it's custom.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say with that, these are all of that is true.
This is the thing, like, the game developer needs to decide what information is meaningful. And if the majority of players decide that some information is more meaningful, the devs need to act on it, either introduce that information or make that information not as meaningful anymore.
I think that's a problem.
That's exactly.
I guess
it.
my response to Jeff would be, if you're saying that, then really that should be an admission that the baseline game
Yes.
has a serious issue that
100%.
Blizzard completely
Yeah.
abdicated on.
That is exactly the.
Definitely, I
There
agree
should-
with everything he said.
I'm totally fine with like having a way to customize your UI, but it should be within the limit of what the devs consider acceptable. It shouldn't be like I can customize absolutely everything, which is what WoW can do right now. You can actually customize everything. You can literally probably have 100 action bars and have one button per action bar located in different parts of your fucking screen.
But I totally disagree with, I think, what his point is about that.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I don't think that's how a designer should see something like
100%.
this. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
No, it's not.
Because
Yeah. No, the designer needs to have a clear view of how the game needs to operate and allow minimal customization. Minimal, I'm saying minimal, but it's not like no customization. It's not like even a bit of customization. There needs to be a minimal amount of customization that the developer is okay with, but other than that, the UI of the game needs to be standard for everyone to remove the advantages other people have by using this a different UI that is not acceptable.
How you design the game, you design the game.
Well, maybe you don't.
Well, you should be designing the game with a pretty clear understanding of what the player's audiovisual experience is going to be.
Yeah.
And what information is important for the player to see, and what information you want hidden or not visible or make it hard to notice, which adds to a difficulty of something.
So if your baseline audiovisual experience is not doing a good job of basically like UX, then it's just not working. So you can't. And I think that maybe not to like pin it on Jeff.
Yeah, it's
I think this is probably an attitude that the team had at a point.
Yeah.
But I think that attitude leads to problems.
I also hate the wording.
Where it's just like, oh well, this is the shit.
I want to see if you'll get back to it.
You can display it in a way that's meaningful to you if you so wish.
Yeah.
But
that word, man, I hate that word.
Maybe if none of that was possible, and then the design constraints, because that's the thing about design and often creativity as well. Constraints are super important.
Yep.
Imagine a Halo show that actually completely went with the constraints of the character as established. It would probably.
Oh my god, Halo fans would have loved it.
It would be a harder creative challenge to work within those. So take a show like Mr. Robot, where the literal situation in its characters is very much something that has to be reflected in the filmmaking, in the way that everything about that show is done. So you've taken the stuff about the plot, the story, the characters, and that is a constraint that you now have to create the show in. And if we think of so many of our favorite bits of media, there are elements of the craft that totally match the constraints, and that's what makes it feel like such an incredible experience. Severance does a pretty good job of that recently as well. You could have something like Severance, but all the filming and stuff could be just, imagine, like in a completely fucking conventional.
Yeah, like the Always Sunny filming, but Severance. That kind of thing.
Well,
yeah, like sitcom stuff.
I just mean like sometimes honing in really well on the constraints allows you to just elevate that experience. I guess maybe the Halo thing is just the more concise point to make. Or Mandalorian even, you don't see Pedro Pascal for most of that. Because that's like a part of the creative constraints.
Yeah, so you have to find a way for the character to display all the emotionality of a character without going, human face is very emotionality. We don't have the human face. How else we do?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of constraints are super important. I don't know. I think it's a bit cowardly to shirk off constraints and just kind of throw all the tools out there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. They're just like...
It's like in this case, how the fuck do you design an encounter?
Oh, well, you have to design an encounter for the base UI, you have to make sure that's playable. They clearly don't a lot of the time.
Yeah, like you,
Oh,
if
at
you're
this point,
designing a
no,
game,
can't.
you should be designing what access to information players have.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
should do that.
That is
and
literally
you
part
should,
of the game.
Yeah, and you should lock down and control what, like
100%.
lock
Yeah.
down and control
You
what the player
can't
has
make.
access to.
Yeah.
You cannot make a design right now that someone who's just using the basic UI can actually participate in. Sorry, you can't make an encounter that someone who's just using the base UI can confidently participate in. You need DBM, you need weak auras, like you just need these things, right? It's literally impossible to do high-end content in WoW without having literally, I would say, is it completely impossible? No. Are you at a massive disadvantage? Yes. Like it's too much of a disadvantage to the point where I would say if you're someone who's new to doing mythic raiding, you're just like, man, I want to dip my toes into mythic raiding, and you're using base UI. Honestly, fuck, even AOTC is not that easy with just base UI, but it's at least very doable. And you just dip your toes into mythic, man. Good luck, straight up. It's like you're not gonna have a good time.
Because if they have access to too much, if they can fucking peek behind the curtain, and it's all different. And I think so many of the issues of these add-ons for people is that you can sort of peek behind the curtain a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
So it's like everything you said is true, and I think it is a very bad thing.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not in on that. Like your class UI, like that the game for so many years has had buffs in fucking Narnia that are important for you to know.
But then they got away. They fixed some of that by having the spell effect stuff. So whenever you're a frost mage and you have a brain freeze proc, it's on your screen. There you go. You've got your 2 fingers of frost. But then
Red Paladin still doesn't have an animation proc for when your Divine Storm is procking from Art of War. Why? Why do I need a weak art to tell me that?
your frozen orb coming up is at the bottom of your screen, and then I know there's some visual effects for you still having icy veins and stuff like that, but it's up at the top right of your screen if you want to see the duration of that.
Yeah.
And that's where maybe it's in the personal resource display as well, but that's the interesting stuff. Like
I'll say, to be clear, I don't think FF14 does a marvelous job of its UI.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Honestly, I think it's a pretty bad UI.
It's got
It is.
quite a number of the same problems. It has a little bit more customization for you to deal with it manually, but it's very much a workaround.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier a couple times this term, you want a solution, not players having workarounds, because that's bullshit.
Yeah. The different.
The problem with FF14, even though like there's a similar problem with FF14's base UI, it is not as crucial. So what do I mean by that? For your DPS rotation, your major cooldowns are 1 and 2 minutes basically. So you actually, by having practice with your rotation, there's almost like basically no proc based class as far as I know. And also in the ones that have proc, the procs are not weapon skills, they're usually abilities. So it doesn't even take away from your actual cooldown. Now what happens, because you have such a set rotation of your abilities, you actually approximately know when your big abilities come off cooldown, because you did X rotation. Let's say you're on your 3rd rotation, that means okay, it's been about a minute, my cooldown is about to come back up, and if you did everything correctly, like you didn't waste any GCD time at all, your cooldown actually hits on a very similar rotation as in your opener in most cases, or like an extremely similar situation in most cases. So in that regard, you don't need weak R to tell you cooldown stuff like that as much. The problem is in WoW, you don't have a base, like a set rotation. You have rotations and it has procs. You have a 3-button rotation. For example, take Fury Warrior. How many rotations of basically 1, 2, and 3 are you gonna have before your Berserker is up? 9, 10, something like that? Because like the GCD is like 1 second. You have 3 buttons, right? So that's 30 seconds ish, right? Yeah, you're gonna have even more than 10 basically. 1.5 second actually. So yeah, it is about 10. Yeah, that's like good luck counting 10 because like you only have those 3 buttons to click and you click them very very fast, one after the other, boom boom boom. And sometimes you have the abilities that are off the GCD that proc, that's fine, but the rotation is so simplistic that you are not going to have a good time. Like you're not going to memorize where in your rotation you are to wait for the cooldown. Take Red Paladin for example. I have I know approximately when my judgment is up, but honestly, I just spam that button while I'm clicking the other buttons. I have a proc for Divine Blade, I think it's called. Blade of Justice, sorry. Blade of Justice. It's either a cooldown or a proc, and it is on the GCD. So if I have it procced, that's a random GCD. Like you're not gonna keep count of that. Divine Stormlight proc, that's a random GCD. The 3 Holy Powers is fine. What else can you have proc? Oh, Divine Purpose can proc, right? And then during your cooldown, let's say you're using Crusade for some odd reason. During Crusade, you're attacking way faster because it increases your haste by 30% once you have the stacks, and usually you're gonna have them within like 3 seconds. And then like all of your cooldowns come up way faster. And now once it slows down, again you're gonna have a hard time on remembering where you are in the rotation. Then you have the 1 minute cooldowns, which is like the level 50 talent or whatever. Then you have Wings, which is a minute and a half or 2 minutes. I don't even remember anymore. I think it's a minute and a half cooldown. And the defensive cooldowns are on 5 minutes, so it's like you never even gonna remember when if you have it on. Like you're probably gonna use it once a fight at most, right? It's like you're not gonna know where you are in your rotation on any class in WoW. So it's like you need to be aware of your cooldowns and your procs. In Final Fantasy, you don't really need to. Like once you're used to it, honestly, okay. For example, Dancer, super proc based class, right? I do my rotation. While I'm doing my rotation, I know after this ability there's a chance, 50% chance for a proc. You know what I'm doing? I'm spamming the button that activates the proc. So for example, let's say my one ability, like my one, has a chance to proc my Alt Q, and my Alt Q has a chance to proc my Num4 button. I am literally, as I'm doing Alt Q, I am spamming my num4 because if it procs, it procs, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and it's fine. I don't need to see my cooldowns. I need to look at my screen to know if I got the cooldown or not. If I got it, I'm doing extra damage. If not, then not. But that's it. Like I'm just spamming that ability, and it doesn't cost me a GCD or anything like that. So I don't need to know if I had the proc. Unlike in WoW, if I don't know that I had the proc, I am actually losing a ton of DPS, and I can't just like it's on the GCD. I can't know, right? So that's the I would say a massive difference between the issues between WoW and Final Fantasy. In Final Fantasy, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Also, the DPS checks in Final Fantasy are not as high. Well, in Ultimates and like if you're just barely making the gear in Savage, then yeah, it matters. But for the most part, it's not as big of a deal as it is in WoW. In WoW, you have very strict DPS checks for literally to phase a boss before a certain ability goes off and stuff like that.
I think with FF is that they are pretty consistent between their difficulty modes and like just the way that they communicate things
That
to
too.
players within a fight.
Yeah.
Also, you not perfectly understanding something is not punished as much because their combat res system. So they have a whole bunch of things that get around how
True.
just the sort of default MMO UI isn't always the best.
Yeah.
And of course, Blizzard are working on trying to baseline some of those features.
Yeah. So in terms of designing a fight around what information is available, this is where I think I have.
I'm totally fine with Blizzard fixing up their UI. The problem is they need to also once they fix up the UI, they need to remove all the add-ons that that basically make their UI relevant. I think that's a very big and important part to it.
A pretty interesting example. I was going to use it later when talking about FF, but I'll use it now. So, in In P1S, in the
Okay.
first Savage Fight of Pandemonium,
It's
there's
the only one he did.
what's called Fourfold Shackles is
Yeah.
an ability.
Yep.
And the strategy that party finders come up with to solve this
3, 8,
is
12,
you check. Basically, everyone gets a unique
18.
debuff. It's either red or blue, or red or purple,
and
and
has
then it has a
timers.
timer. I think it's 3, 8, 13, or 18 seconds.
Well, yeah.
And people have like 8 markers on the
Well, I guess
actual
it's
game
13
world,
technically, but yeah.
and based on which color and which duration, you go there.
Yep.
So Fourfold Shackles casts, you see your debuff. Say, I think the example I have in my head is 3 seconds red. You move to the marker that's C. Someone with blue and 3 would move to the marker 3. So everyone sees that debuff, and that little click of that's blue, that's 8, I go here. There's a world where
you don't need an add-on to tell you that.
You could have a weak aura literally programmed to, instead of saying you have this debuff, it would just calculate, oh, C or 3 or 4 or whatever marker. It would say moon, say for world markers, and you would just go there. And that's literally just an informational difference.
Yeah.
That's just a little tiny informational difference that completely changes how the entire thing is felt by you. It removes one step of calculation in your head. It's not a massive calculation. It's literally just like a fucking, an if fucking thing in code. That's all it is.
Yep.
But it's that little thing of you're not doing that, so it feels less enjoyable. And that's something I noticed doing Savage. But another example of that is automated callouts. And this is what they got in trouble for in FF, where they have triggers and cackbot stuff, just doing automated callouts for when things happen. So instead of you having to see, oh, the boss is raising its hand one way, or something else is happening like that.
See, so for these callouts thing, if it calls out an ability, like a text-to-speech kind of thing, I'm totally okay with. However, if it's something like the boss raises his arm, and that's not a cast time, it's just the boss raises his arm, and you have to visually see it raising because he's going to do a certain ability without the information of a cast bar, that should not be called out. Okay? Because the whole point of like calling it like a text-to-speech kind of thing, I would say I can consider that accessibility. However, actually calling out an ability that the boss is doing, which is not being written on the screen, it's just a visual thing. You should not be able to hear anything telling you that command.
There's something happening. They'll check the either it's the network traffic for a specific packet or like a battle log call it or something, and then something will pick that up and then go, this is happening, and then you'll hear it through text to speech or it'll print a message or something on your screen. And that's a case of you don't actually have to look and see. Something else brings it to your attention. Raid leaders do that a lot of the time. In WoW, was like, oh, this thing's coming up next.
I'm totally fine with raid leaders doing it because a player has to pay attention to that, which means it's taking away from his other things. Raid leading and having a bot do it for you are completely different. Also, raid leading is a part of the raid team in the sense that it's an actual person and his job is to raid lead and everyone needs to listen to him. Having the bot do it for you substantially makes the fight a lot easier. Now, technically, you can say it's like, well, they're doing the same job. Yes, but the guy who's raid leading, that's also a skill that he developed to do that. You're taking away people's abilities to do certain things by adding these bots in.
We call it, but that's a part of gameplay. Whereas if something else solves it for you, then that's just you have an informational advantage, and that makes the game easier.
Yep.
And that's the thing where they should have control over how you solve that problem. Like with the Sekiro example earlier, it'd be very different if you had a text-to-speech voice say, "Bikiri, counter this," or "Jump this," versus you having to go, "What am I doing?
There is.
Oh, I jump." I think that's kind of the crux of like the raid design part of it. There's also like fucking so much else in terms of just what weak auras do. In terms
also,
of
don't forget, there's always gonna be a delay for a raid leader to see a mechanic, to announce the mechanic, to think what the mechanic is, and to announce it properly. Okay, whereas and like let's say it like this: there's a mechanic that targets 3 different people. The raid leader has to recognize who the 3 people are, tell them where they need to go each. That is a massive delay. The people themselves need to know what to do at that time as well, and having the bot do it for them just takes away from the game.
Because the difference between the weak aura, because everyone just uses the like proper recourse from, is it Cossis, I think his name is, who makes most of them. And that just goes, big fast flashing icon with the icon of the debuff. It just says stack. You knowing the stack is like, oh, well, but you know that if you know the mechanic. Yeah, but what if you forget the weak aura reminds you? You're playing, the game's easier. The game's easier because the information's there. You don't have to connect those neurons. And connecting neurons is fucking fun.
Yeah, that's actually game.
Yeah, that's the game, yeah.
Right. Here's the thing. Dark Souls is a fucking easy game.
Easy as fuck, yeah.
It actually is. In my opinion, Dark Souls 1 was a super easy game. I literally died to gravity more so than I died to the environment, more so than I died to any mob. Dark Souls 3 is harder, but it's hard because it's faster. It's a lot smoother, and I think that's fine. It's not a problem. Dark Souls 1 though, however, in my opinion, but again, I'm coming in at it I played it when it was remastered and 4 years old of remaster, so it was pretty old, I think, at that point. So obviously the game itself would be a lot easier for someone who played video games for pretty much my whole life. While Dark Souls 3, I can say, was actually considerably more difficult. Not super hard, but definitely more difficult. And Elden Ring, in my opinion, is as difficult as you want to make it.
Easy as fuck game. I'm not good at reliably executing on that easy as fuck game, therefore it's hard.
Yeah, you just press buttons at the right time, easy.
Yeah, bruh.
It's like a rhythm.
Just get good.
Yeah, because
it's literally I just get good.
Yeah, it's like imagine you're playing Dark Souls, right? Or any fucking combat game with a dodge.
Yeah.
And instead of the enemy having a wind up and then a swing, and you have to know to dodge, imagine, because this is something that Trek to Yomi does, right? The enemy's blade will flash when it's time for you to hit the parry button. So you don't have to learn anything about when in their swing point they're going to swing. You just look, and it's a very short time, so you need fast reactions, and it helps if you learn because you can preempt and stuff. But if you're fast enough, you can go parry. You can just parry fucking anything because the normal enemies have that flash to tell you when to parry. That's there. So you're playing an action game, and instead of it being see how the swing goes, it's, I think someone said a slow down QTE, but that's kind of it. Where imagine a version where actually the button you're supposed to press flashes on your screen, and there's a rhythm game style thing closing in on it, and then it goes perfect whenever you hit the button, and that's what you're just tapping the button on the perfectly timed prompt, as opposed to trying to figure out what part of the swing is going to hit you or what not. That's the kind of thing, basically.
Yeah. So that's it. It's WoW is an easy solved game at almost. Unless you are making the strategy, i.e. world first. Yeah. WoW is an easy solved game.
Oh, super.
In a way.
MMOs are fucking piss easy.
Yeah. But it's, can you do it?
Yeah.
Can you connect those neurons?
I could. Bobby John Jr., however, could not. And that's why the Mythic Raid failed multiple times. And that's why Mythic Raiding was no longer fun. Because Bobby John Jr. fucking sucks at connecting those fucking neurons.
Yeah. Right? It's you can read up how to do the fight. You're like, oh, it's an easy fight. I just do that. Because you can compare whenever you're comfortable with a fight, whenever you're not comfortable with a fight. When you're comfortable, it feels easy, even if it felt really hard at the start. Yeah. A good example of that for me is, say, Highland, normal. Yeah. Fucking terrifying. To you, it's just done.
Yeah,
easy.
Nothing.
Yeah, I see light waves and I scream.
Yeah.
But you get it because you've put the neurons together.
I've done it more than I've done it,
Yeah. So, I guess that's the thing. The more that add-ons just kind of give players react to this, react to this, react to this, orders, then I think you end up with this situation. You got these guilds where the second they don't have add-ons and a raid leader doing things, whole thing falls apart because nobody actually knows what they're doing. Yeah. They're just responding to shit.
And that's what add-ons have done to World of Warcraft.
And this is where Jeff is really hitting being in the money here.
Yeah.
The pace of the game has definitely changed over the years in response to player use of those tools. Yeah. And maybe that's not the sort of thing he could have said.
That's the word, man. What's meaningful to them because it's custom? Man, it needs to be meaningful to the devs, not to the fucking players.
Not much as about them.
Definitely not. No. I mean, it took...
I wasn't itching my balls. I was itching my thigh next to my balls, though.
The Blizzard assassins are onto you! Quickly, get in cover!
Yeah, so like it took Ian being on Asmongold's stream,
I'm sure
which
that went
is
down well.
like that is such an unprecedented thing. Basically, I would never.
I think it was a
expect
matter of
I
time.
even see that as a massive victory for Blizzard going, fuck, maybe we need to do something different. But like, it took that for them to
Yeah, I
actually
guess.
finally say,
I don't know.
yes,
I cannot imagine that was popular internally.
I can't imagine either. But at least if the game director.
The thing is, Ian doesn't hate Asmongold though. You can tell by the interview that he doesn't. I don't think Ian hates almost any of the content creators. Are there people on the team that hate Asmongold? Yeah, I'm sure there's a few people on the team who hate Asmongold because he said something they didn't like, even though they probably like couldn't argue that point. But whatever. However, you liking somebody does not mean that you should ignore that somebody, especially when they're as big as Asmongold and have such a massive reach over the community. And I think Asmongold showed it the best when he played Final Fantasy XIV, and so many people played after him, or played with him, or stopped playing WoW at that very, very close to it moment.
going, fuck it, we need to do something. That's hopeful. So like, it took that level of, oh fuck, this is new, this is different, this is crazy Blizzard. I'm just gonna call him Crazy Blizzard now on. This is crazy Ian actually talking about add-ons being a problem.
Wow,
I
is
think
that a
that's
video title? Did you just spontaneously start talking in video titles?
Maybe, but that's the thing. Was like, holy shit, Crazy Ian's finally admitted add-ons fucking suck. That's a thing where that's obviously that would be a super clickbait version, but that's what it took.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can imagine. They
And
definitely couldn't say
it's
this.
the sort of thing. I think Zach will add on it, and something I sort of came to believe as well during Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah.
Because it's been since WoD
Mhm.
that discussion of the game is in a way too hard, and hard's the wrong word.
It's too fucking complicated. It's too informationally dense a lot of the time.
Yeah. So this is where I think I suppose Jeff is now talking about something that I think to tie it into the Ian interview that Asmongold's been talking about since WoD, which is the game just fucking hard. There's a lot of shit, and I know for a bunch of people in and around here that's not going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe certainly people who looked at that Sepulchre of the First One's raid clip.
Look, the thing is, even if they made the game, the Mythic Raid, twice as easy and more accessible, still majority of players will not be able to clear it. That's how hard the content is. Where even if you made it twice as easy, majority of players would not clear it.
They're going to think, well, fuck, of course they think the game is hard. Look at them.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, don't worry. We've had clown fiestas too. Many of them. Oh, fucking hell, we really have had some clown fiestas. But sometimes the clown fiesta raid nights where you make no progress, but everyone is fucking howling with laughter.
Yeah. Well,
Those are the best. But anyway, point is, I guess, for like your very average player, in a game where, as Jeff here is saying, the pace has definitely changed over response to those tools. Loads of players won't even know about those tools. Yeah. For some players, the idea of having, and I even see this in our video comments, that's the more engaged by people who just don't want to have to download a thing, to do a thing, to do a thing, to do a thing, to do a thing, to set up the thing so that it can be done, and then they're worried it'll break in the next patch.
Yeah, fuck that.
By the way, generally it doesn't, at least in my experience.
Well, it breaks, but because of PTR and shit, they're updated in time.
Yeah, so like, it's evidently an issue for quite a few players.
Yeah.
And I think that just means that like the game has kind of passed them by. So yeah, so Jeff is saying the pace of the game has changed because Blizzard are getting used to people having these tools. That means there could be a really cool mechanic, like let's just say the Among Us mechanic.
Yep.
Will Blizzard feel like that has to have a harder time requirement because of an add-on? The was it Mout? Who was the bug dude? The fake bugs appeared, and then we kind of cheesed the mechanic because both of our tanks were playing in the same room in Nyalotha. Whatever that boss was.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever that boss was.
Yeah.
It's like, could Blizzard actually make those mechanics a bit slower, a bit more of a, hang on, right, let's work out this problem, team.
Yeah.
Instead of a, do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it? And everyone's screaming and panicking. Yeah. And could they slow those things down and have them be a bit more reasonable and accessible, but still, Skitra, that was it. But, they still achieve their core design goals. Yeah, could they do that more successfully in a world where they don't feel like they need to increase the pace of the game in response to add-ons? And if... But Jeff goes on to say that, though, it's a big problem. The new players may need those tools; they can't keep up, or maybe they want them, but ripping them out would just hurt everything. Here's the thing: would completely murdering, obliterating computational add-ons in a in an instanced setting. Like, would a new expansion be the time to do it?
Yep,
Yes,
that's the
but
only time to
And
do it.
just fully design raid fights with that in mind.
That's the only time to do it.
Well,
Can't do
yeah,
They
it
won't
during a
do it, by the
patch.
way, but
yeah. How do you destroy the
No, they won't do
computational
it.
add-ons and not everything else?
Everyone knows they won't do it.
Because
Yes.
It's all. This is what Ian was saying in the interview. It's all weak auras. Weak auras is literally too powerful a framework. If they have to kill what weak auras can do because weak auras has all that like computational stuff built into itself. So they need to kill the ability to show something custom on screen. That's what they basically need to do. And that would just do so much damage to everything. It's like you were saying about, like, you know, putting stuff on raid frames. You would have to kill custom raid frames for that to
could you
make
make
sense.
protected auras?
I think they've been trying that and sometimes failing. I think that's like a lot of what they were doing with
Right.
what do they call it? I think that's how they got the Amogus stuff to work.
Okay.
Because obviously there's no add-on that just tells you. You have to even the like the solution add-on or
Yeah,
the solution Wikora is the vote UI, which obviously makes it super easy and doesn't
Yeah.
require any explanation whatsoever.
But
But yeah,
it does at least involve players looking around, having a quick think, and voting. So at least there's a little bit of a gameplay in that.
there's a tiny bit, yeah. So it's like that's what they
Maybe-
have. That's what they're trying to do.
Maybe it's just being more ambitious in mechanics like that, and just furthering their ability to do protected auras. When I say protected auras, basically, like there's some variables and functions, whatever, in the game that are protected that add-ons cannot access.
Like the whole secure button thing, where you an add-on can't press a button for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So by making those things protected, the add-ons couldn't interact.
Yep.
So there you go. Maybe they just continue to really go hardcore in that.
Yeah, well then
But
that's.
I guess what I would like to see is what are the cool things that we could buy with the room that is left, the room that is created by toning some of those things down.
Yeah, that's the awkward thing. But then that's like, well, yeah, that's basically what they kind of have to do. I hate that Among Us mechanic because of the Wikora, because we initially ran into it and had a fucking massive nightmare, and we're like all talking over each other trying to get it solved, and then we thought, well, we need to fucking figure this out, and we sat, and I remember we had figured out a very, you know, people would call and then we'd have a very quick response.
It's like the whole maze in Ardenville dungeon, whatever it was called. The whole maze there with figuring out which one is the sign that is not has no commonalities, right? The odd sign out, and then the boss has the same thing, but. And in my opinion, that was pretty fun. The problem is, it's a Mythic Plus and it's timed, and one fuck up can mean the whole run is over. So obviously, you're gonna have an add-on that tells you how to solve the maze without people actually like clicking, going next to the signs to figure it out, right? And then it's just the boss. But the boss, in my opinion, was pretty easy to figure out which one is the odd one out. So it's not that big of a deal because they're all shown versus like. In the maze, they are like you have to stand next to them to show them, and you have to remember. So obviously, people would use an add-on. But in my opinion, the maze was actually one of the funnest part in the dungeon. But it can get annoying obviously after a few rounds.
Based on like, you know, okay, who agrees, who disagrees, and that'll be like a very quick, like almost like a tournament bracket for who it is, would run really quickly, and then just got the Wikor, and then didn't have turned it into the right name. As opposed to having fun and working it out together, and that's really awkward. Then there's other stuff like I can figure out, you know, oh, this is definitely a mechanic that requires a voice chat to be super well done and done in time, so that's an accessibility issue again.
That too, yeah. You need a mic.
I really wish I had a better way to say this, but I feel like a lot of people who don't understand the damage add-ons are doing, and like them, are hiding behind accessibility as an argument, as opposed to thinking outside the box and how can we solve both of these. Especially because I look over at FF's design and how it's designed to not have any, like, you know, no mid-fight communication requirements. You can solve every problem before the fight, and then adjust after the fight. But you don't need to communicate mid-fight because console players can't type, without a keyboard, and you don't want people to have to go buy something to play your game. And also, voice chat is an issue for here and there. And obviously, that's
True.
a very different kind of raid design. And World of Warcraft with the Among Us mechanic, with the Blood Queen Lanethal stuff, as Ian was pointing out, that stuff designed to be there, so it's kind of hard to have both there. But it's like we're talking about, throw in a bunch of ping mechanics, like the Apex ping system, to kind of have intelligent stuff go on there. A little bit, a couple of default macros for communication or something like that would maybe solve that problem a little bit. But it's fundamentally, I think there's so much man, there's just so much. There's so many problems with these fucking add-ons, but people haven't been talking about it for so long. It's such a deeply, I don't want to say like rotten to the core, but it's that like really deeply entrenched parasite in a way.
Just a horrible position. It's what Dagor kind of calls out here.
Yeah.
Blizzard has to design around add-ons. If they don't design around add-ons, then the people with add-ons will find the game to be way undertuned.
Yeah.
And they'll...
So what? So what if they find the game undertuned? Why? Like, who cares if like you're using add-ons and the game is easy? You will have, and you want to make it harder to do. Go ahead and play without the add-ons. Oh, I'm playing with add-ons, so the game is easy. Okay, good for you. You have time to go and do the same raid with other fucking people on another fucking character then.
They'll sail through the game. And then they won't have a satisfying experience. Then you say, yeah, but don't use add-ons. But it's a decently competitive game. People want to get ahead. People want to, even at the very basic thing of, I want to get the big cool sword and make my character's number go up faster. They're of course going to use the add-ons. It's not like the entire player base is going to sit down and form a gentleman's agreement not to use add-ons. I guess that's the thing. Just don't use add-ons, bro. That's not the problem. It's
not the problem. It's not an individual problem. It's a systematic problem.
Yeah, exactly.
It is almost that like, well, just don't just recycle, bro. Just just don't pollute.
Yeah.
Just don't look after your own place. Like,
just make the supply chain ethical, bro.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, it's like that is relatively fair for anyone to try and do that, but that doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
It would be nice for a person to do that, but it's not going to solve anything. I think that's the major thing I take away. But then obviously I will also suggest that a lot of my approach to this is very much, I'm going to think about the bigger picture, because I'm not fucking playing this game that add-ons. Fuck you. They have to make me, because I am a player, and I will take the path of least resistance because I am a player.
Yeah,
that's what I am.
Usually,
Matt, you big fucking commie. If you're going to complain about those gasoline prices, just use your freedom not to drive your car.
Exactly.
I love that he's saying that, because that was actually an argument that CNN made recently. It's kind of fun that he's actually saying it unironically.
Facts.
Yeah, it's as
Slam.
Yeah, it's as Dakor say. Yet you participate. Curious, I am very smart.
That's it. Yeah, straight to r/I am very smart. One of the funniest places in the internet. I have Piazza Fantasyland statement.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just in Fantasyland, Disneyland Paris. Pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, there's like Hoodoo says, they made game that rely on so much tracking things, especially for dot users. The base game UI is useless. They'll kill the game if they ban add-ons. That's the thing. Imagine doing Mythic Plus without, as a healer, would I be able to see all of your tank's defensives handily?
Oh,
scuffed. Imagine being able to not track other people's interrupts, so you end up like shitting your interrupts on something that needs interrupted really badly, and your whole run's been fucked because you're like high Mythic Pluses on a knife's edge.
Yeah, the whole design of the Mythic Plus. And here's the thing, actually. It's not even their fault. It is because they designed it. The thing with Mythic Plus is it will always get to a level of difficulty where an add-on will be needed to optimally plan your stuff to progress in realistic scenarios.
Yep, exactly.
Purely because it's an infinitely, not... It could scale forever. You know what I mean, though.
Yeah, it's like if having an add-on will help you do 1% more damage or take 1% less damage, and that 1% of damage is what's killing you versus letting you clear, then the add-on is going to be necessary because it scales up to that point eventually, no matter what. It is inevitable it'll get to that point.
And I suppose it's just the way some of the game is played in ye olde modern day, and maybe the Mythic Plus system, those kind of... Yeah, they maybe encourage people to feel like they need that sort of thing. And then, of course, there's the whole cultural aspect, too.
Yeah, of course.
which obviously we don't really need to talk about it too much.
For sure.
So let's see. Right, Dakor is a smart cookie and a CE Mythic Raider. So let's see what he has to say. Large disparity between those that use add-ons and don't on the whole. Those Destro Warlocks that dot snapshot and don't in Myths of Pandaria, something Blizzard found to be a massive design issue.
Yep.
While there are indeed outliers on both sides for this, the majority of cases there is a very large gap. People that don't use add-ons for the most part are at large disadvantage compared to those who do in all aspects of endgame. Even the auction house. You don't here by the way, right, if you don't have TSM, you're fucked.
Don't even bother.
You can do really well without TSM, but it is like a crazy next level whenever you use TSM.
Yeah.
And I will say, I'm totally the sort of person who would use TSM because it is some fucking gorgeous nerdy shit.
Yeah.
But equally, is that just kind of saying, I would like to be in the big 1% and all of you peons of the server will buy my wares. Ha ha ha, I've cornered the market.
Yeah.
Versus maybe a more healthy sort of economy for all of the players in the game. I don't know, something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, like, trying to be an auctioneer without using Trade Skill Master is like showing up to a rally on a fucking bike. That's what it's like. It's like, no, you do not have an engine. Where the fuck are you?
I mean, I
supposed to
get
go?
it, but like,
A Subaru versus an
gold
e-bike.
farming is really not that hard.
Part of the race to
But
world
yeah, if
first
you're min-maxing,
has now
I guess,
become an
yeah.
arms race between who has the best developers, timers, and weak auras.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
also true.
Yep,
Crazy. I mean,
it is true.
in one side of things, it is really cool. And the part of the race to world first
It is pretty cool that there's one person in the race that is in charge of making weak auras for the raid. That's their participation in the world first. But that shouldn't be a part of the fucking game.
To be honest with you, I don't watch the race to world first. I just don't find it to be interesting.
It's
to watch.
really not interesting
Yeah,
to
I enjoyed
watch.
the drama
It's
aspect of it.
honestly, it's really not interesting to watch. It's really not interesting to anything. Like the highlights are not interesting. The final kill is not interesting. Personally, the only thing that was interesting about it is seeing the strat they used and trying to copy the strat as someone who's mythic rating. But let's be real, those strats are also catered to their comp, right? So it's like if your comp is not that, the strat will likely not work for you anyway, so it doesn't even matter. And then so it's like there's nothing really interesting about the race to world first in my opinion. And the nerdgasm at the end is to me very cringy.
But I also enjoy seeing some comps.
What I enjoy,
Yep.
in the same way, basically what I enjoy about the race to world first is hearing about the logistics because I'm just not interested in WoW as an esport. Personally, only personally, this is not a disparagement on people who do.
He hates it.
Um,
He thinks you're stupid for liking it.
Oh, jeez. But the bit of the race to world first that I find really interesting is the human endeavor of it.
Yeah, that's
Like the lengths to these people, to which these people go. The way that they have weak aura creators, as Inspector Cav's just pointing out, they have weak aura creators like on staff,
Yeah,
sitting there.
Yeah.
literally pay them to make cheats for the game.
Yeah, it's like all the
Basically,
all the
yeah.
raiders have been. I don't know. They've been fucking greased up and ready to go. There's a fucking team of drone operators behind them doing all this crazy shit. It's all madness.
Yeah.
It's pretty
right?
fucked up,
A
yeah.
million goblins, 90.
And that's what I'm saying. Like if you're competing in race to world first, you might as well drop out if you don't have a massive fucking sponsorship. Because like it's not humanly possible to compete with people who have this kind of background.
Grand worth of WoW gold.
You might be a better player than them. You're not gonna win regardless. You might have a 20 player roster that is way better than anyone who beats world first, and you will still not win against them just because of the amount of time they have to spend and the background, like all the background around them, surrounding them, is just massive advantage.
and all this crazy, like, man, it's such a cool endeavor.
Yep.
But yeah, undoubtedly, like, we're at the stage where software development is now a core part of WoW as an esport.
Yeah,
The fuck, like,
This is quite
Imagine.
very interesting,
yeah,
isn't it?
straight up, go fuck yourself, like.
straight up.
Now
Yeah.
that's not the whole story. There's obviously all the player effort, all of the skill. A bad player with add-ons is a bad player,
Yep.
for sure. But there are some things that just
A bad player with add-ons is still a bad player, but he's still better than the other bad player who's not using add-ons.
are ways here are trivialized. Then maybe something's wrong there. I mean, applied to the Drover thingy from Putricide and Wrath of the Lich King. I remember the very day that I refreshed MMO Champion to look at that back in 2009. Or was it 10? I forget. Anyway.
Putricide would have been 2009, right?
I'm just thinking by the time Putricide unlocked and Act was actually, or whatever it was called, actually shut down. Could have been early 2010.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
because it was December 2000.
yeah, 2010, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No!
Yeah.
No!
Because
What?
Fall of the Lich King was December 2009.
Oh, yeah. Yes!
Yeah.
Yes.
No, no,
And the argument
yes,
most people are
yes.
making not to remove is to not remove the ability to more easily track buffs, debuffs, cooldowns, abilities. No, the crux of the issue is the ability of weak auras to tell you when something is happening, what to do, where to go, who to pair up with, and what the solution is. The correct, more balanced and less emotional response to this would be to lobby Blizzard to add the non-game breaking functionality of most popular add-ons and weak auras to the base game experience. Something they're starting to do. Yeah, it's like, look.
No one said that's what they're doing yet. They said they're changing the UI, but I highly doubt it will be anywhere what you can do with like weak auras. We'll see. I mean, there's no reason to doubt them for the UI changes. But like, if they make it so that it's easy, you can change your UI to the point where you can easily see buffs, debuffs, cooldowns, and abilities. That would be a massive win, in my opinion, as far as the UI goes. But it only is a win if they disable the ability to use weak auras and DBM, stuff like that as well. Remove bartender, expert, of UI, all that stuff, make those stuff unaccessible if you're already making changes. First of all, it's good for the mental of the developers. Imagine the developers are working on something that and they're working hard on that. Like, UI changing is not that easy. This is like a pretty decent, massive project, and like they have to account for a lot of things and code for a lot of different debuffs and buffs and stuff like that. There's a lot that goes into it. And imagine after all that hard work, no one's gonna use it. They're still gonna use add-ons, man. That shit is demotivating. Like, why would they ever want to do it again?
If some new bit of do this is going to be in the game, let that be something the designer has put in there that they have designed as a part of my combat experience.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of just me getting around their design.
Yeah, there's maybe just because we haven't had one in a little bit of a while, there's maybe like a food analogy here of it being a buffet versus a design fucking experience. And I think design experiences are generally a lot what people play games for a little bit more or a little better of it, like especially as a subsection.
Yeah.
It's like you want your buffet to be I will engage in raiding today, thank you very much. I'll have a full plate of Mythic Plus. I'll have a bowl of crafting for dessert. Versus, that's what you want, but you don't want to be like, well, I have to fucking, put together my raiding experience. So I'll have, it's falling apart here for sure.
Okay.
But it's like, people want a designed one.
Is it a buffet of final meal items or is it a buffet of ingredients?
That's the thing. At the minute, it's like a buffet of ingredients more so. Where in the ideal world, you want a actual final meal item. You want to have the designer have designed the thing, as opposed to they've half cooked it and you're supposed to fucking finish it.
Yeah. That's true, because like, I don't want a world where Peter Yu can't do what he does.
I would be willing to accept that for improvements elsewhere. That's the thing. But that's a weird dichotomy, and it's like one of these will have to be sacrificed. And as much as I love Narcissus, I think I'd rather have it go away. Because I'd rather have the game that Blizzard designed.
Well, I don't think there's probably a lot of stuff that Narcissus does that have nothing to do with any change we're talking about here anyway.
Yeah, and more like in a choose A or B.
Yeah,
I would take one, but obviously there's a nuanced answer in the middle.
Fucking mosquitoes,
so that's
man.
what can be done. Well, the aim and guiding star of UX and game development is that players don't feel the desire or need to download and use any external third-party software. It should all be possible out of the box. Just like with the lore.
Imagine.
No fight or
one step at a time, guys. One step at a time.
Designed around or become trivial with the use of add-ons or weak auras. Yeah. What about somebody who is dealing with accessibility issues for the game? Yeah, I suppose that is the question. I don't know if Dakor's dropped any answers here, but I think probably talking with those players is the start.
Yeah, well, here's the problem. Like, these aren't problems you can just solve. These aren't like, oh yeah, here's the answers. Because it'd be great if we could just get, here's all the answers. We'll sell them to you for 100 for like, here's Blizzard, give us a mill. Here's all the answers. They have to figure it out. It's kind of their job to figure this stuff out.
Well, they have to figure out what are the actual difficulties people have with accessibility first.
And they've not been doing it because they've let us figure it out for them. And turns out if you let players design the UI, they'll design the UI that makes your game fucking easy.
Yeah, well, I suppose for the most part, for the fundamentals of accessibility, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about enemy outlines, things like that, where it's like if they added in more things like that were just turned on by default, or just any of that, players would instantly just turn it on.
Yeah,
which is tricky, but you could totally see why those would be valid things to add. I think openness for other types of controller is probably one of the most important things. So I was very happy.
Got that with the.
Yeah, we got that with the console stuff. So you don't need to install WoW Mapper now if you want to use a gamepad for accessibility reasons.
They would need a UI for that to be super ideal, but
yeah, they really should have a UI for that. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just making the base UI better, really.
See,
basically.
That's an interesting one. I think I kind of talked this, but there's Ray's saying, but an easy UI is good. It really helps you play with actual game mechanics. The UI is the game mechanic. The designers designed the UI as well. That's the thing people like. I completely understand what you're saying, and I believe I probably would have agreed at the time, but I've been thinking about it a lot more. I'm like, no, I think the UI is part of the design.
I was like trying to think about a more holistic experience. It's like everything on that fucking screen while WoW.exe is open is the game.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, even like default controllers and stuff, like what thinking about that comes into it. It's like an example of, even keybinds is an interesting example.
Yeah.
Where, obviously we've moved to customizable controls a lot of the time because people haven't decided that's like a super important part of like the design or the gameplay, and you're allowed to customize that. But like default controls are a part of design. Do you put something on, say you put aim down sight on a controller on like the square button or the X button, and then you put shoot on B or the like a circle button. That's fucking insane. That would mean you'd have to play the game with your thumb horizontal to try and aim down sight and shoot at the same time. And that would be bullshit. But if they did that for a reason, they would do that because that would make the game harder. That's a valid control thing. And that's where Blizzard's default keybinds fucking suck balls. And they are super, super, super hard to actually play with. If you play with one across the number pad, or across the number pad, the fucking number row,
oh, okay, so
the game is just harder for you.
Yeah.
Versus having them in a place where you can actually, put, I guess, like my interrupt always on V, so I can hit it with my thumb at a moment's notice. That makes the game easier than if my interrupt was on equal, where I'd have to take my right hand off the mouse and hit equal, or move my left hand away from movement controls the whole way over. And this is the kind of stuff that's like part of the holistic experience.
Yeah.
And you've been able to see the information is there as well. It's like that's the stuff that's kind of important. It's like cast bars for enemies and stuff. That's all actually part of the design. Do you want an enemy to cast and just have a cast bar and animation, or do you want them to grow really massive so you can click them really easy and interrupt them? It's kind of the small differences of like the entire usability structure is the game mechanic.
Yeah, even things like if you have a cast at mouse position in world space, a macro for Blizzard, you could say, then one of your instant blizzards feels way better with that control scheme. And it's just that thing. Controls are a part of game design. Yeah. And your key bindings are controls. So imagine playing a new game and it doesn't have great controls. The game will feel less fun to you.
It can be harder.
And it would be harder, yeah. So it's interesting. So let's see, what's Dakar got for us? The end result of baking all the great functionality and customization that these third-party add-ons provide into the base game is a much better product and experience for all players, especially the average, more casual-oriented or impaired player. Players need to be listened to and heard. On the side of this argument, if there's ever going to be a chance of resolving a satisfactory way, a middle ground that most people will be happy in. If all add-ons and weak cores were to suddenly disappear overnight, then that would be a massive impact for people who use them.
Well, you can't just make them disappear overnight. You have to have something to take that switch from it, right? It's not like you can just delete it and fine. You have to switch from it to something more accessible. The reason you have them already is because of the accessibility of the game and the lack of information that the game provides. That's why you have them. If you just remove it outright, you have to have a system in place. Otherwise, people are just really not going to be happy.
Be that for accessibility reasons, or be
Even
that
if in
for just
principle
performance
you
reasons.
should remove
So
them.
yeah, I don't think anyone is saying just rip them all out at once. I think maybe it's, well, some people are definitely saying remove all add-ons.
People are saying that, but that would do a substantial amount of damage.
I would advocate for make the base UI better and better. It's like there's a supply demand thing.
It's
not literally supply demand, but like what is our supply in a way here? It's like how good is the base UI, because that like kind of curbs players' appetite for add-ons. So I think you do that, but then to curb the negative externalities of players feeding that appetite on your game design, then protect more functions and do everything you can to shut down the computational aspects of add-ons while trying to preserve as many of the good things as you can, which is no doubt a really hard challenge, given that Weak Auras is doing so much of that lifting itself, because it's fucking marvelous what Weak Auras can do.
It is
like just as a piece of software, it's incredible.
It is fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
honestly, yeah, Weak Auras are way too strong in the game.
Absolutely. It's there's just no fucking answer. I guess that's the annoying part. There's no answer, so we have to find one over time. And it's like, I guess it's almost the same as like you're saying supply and demand. It's thinking the piracy problem, whereas like add-ons provide a better service than the game, so the game needs to provide a better service than the add-ons.
Yeah,
and that's the only way they'll win, but they have to do that to win. So yeah.
Look at this guy. I feel like they should remove any mod or add-on that gives you an advantage over the game. UI improvements are totally fine. Can't compute. UI improvements are totally fine. Remove any mod that gives you an advantage over the game. Anything else should be either portrayed by boss movements or sounds to show he's casting something. As for damage meters, it's the second most toxic thing in the game. Raid arrow is the first. I think the players are more toxic than the damage meters. The game is in a place where it has to design itself around third-party add-ons, then it's in a bad place. Definitely need to do away with add-ons in raids. Referring to DBM and Weak Auras, not UI add-ons. Again, the UI add-ons. Weak Aura is technically a UI add-on. That's all it is. A lot of times, yeah, like when it tells you how to do mechanics, that's fine. But it's like for the most part, Weak Aura is a UI add-on. WoW should not ditch add-ons, but it does need to take a serious look at making bosses and NPCs do way more telegraphed abilities. For example, if there is a time during a boss encounter when casting Bloodlust is suggested, i.e. Vigilant Guardian 50%, then make an observer-style NPC like Jaina or Thrall should shout something like "Strike now, heroes, the enemy is vulnerable," and the boss reaches that health percentage, and also make the boss do an animation to show the players it's vulnerable, and give the boss a vulnerable, do as much damage as possible debuff. Blizzard has the right idea with giving the player an energy bar to look at Vigilant Guardian, but they need to take that idea and make it even more obvious for the players. When the energy bar gets to 75%, an observer-style NPC like Jaina should shout something like "The Guardian is powering up to exterminate us all. I can create a shield to protect us." And also give all players a debuff that says "Targeted for extermination. Get ready to move inside Jaina's shield." When the energy bar gets to 95%, an observer-style NPC like Jaina should again shout, "Now heroes take shelter within the shield." Sometimes I feel the telegraph abilities are difficult to see. I don't really agree with this, because what's the difference in this and like Weak Aura? Sometimes I feel telegraph abilities are difficult to see. There is simply too much going on in some encounters. This is true. This is the biggest one. That's why Weak Auras and DBM are great, because this is fucking true. But this also happens because you have DBM and Weak Auras. And sometimes I feel they are not consistent. In one raid, standing in a swirly is a good thing, and in another it will kill you or even wipe the entire raid. Actually, pretty sure the telegraph of the ability is the same whether you need to stand in it or not, unless they change something in the new raid. But like up to Castle Nathria, you knew what you can stack in and what you need to get the fuck out of. The team should strive to do a complete overhaul of the visuals for every boss ever made. Not gonna happen.
To standardize them and make raiding more accessible, players should know what to do just by the visuals, so they don't even need to open the adventure guide or watch a YouTube video showing how to beat the boss. LFR should be returned to be even easier. LFR should just be removed. Normal's easy enough. Like just the story mode, basically just give every LFR group 10 stacks of determination all the time. Honestly, if you're doing this, just fucking do it with NPCs. And you can AFK and watch the NPCs kill stuff. I mean, it kind of sucks when your experience when joining LFR varies wildly. You either join a group with 0 stacks and the boss feels difficult, or a group with 10 stacks determination and the boss is a pushover. Normal should be returned with the goal of being very easy. Basically, any POG group should be able to clear it without much, if any, struggle at all. The only exception should be the last boss in the raid, which might be okay to feel more challenging. Rogue should feel like normal Sepulchre of the first ones feels now. The training wheels have come off and you can actually die to some of the mechanics. There should generally never be new mechanics introduced at this point. I disagree. Heroic should have new mechanics, like one or two new mechanics per boss. Mythic should be a punishing experience. It should require players to optimize their character in almost perfect play. It should not reward higher item level gear just cosmetic rewards. I agree. Blizzard should also look at reintroducing more one boss raids like Onyxia was. Don't really care about this part, but I mean, maybe. Anyways, that's the video. It's like honestly, pretty much I'm very much in agreement in almost everything they said. I think I added a few points that they weren't mentioning, or I mentioned them. I said them before they mentioned it, like literally like the next second. But yeah, the add-ons are definitely a massive topic of discussion in Final Fantasy and in WoW. In my opinion, short answer is yes, but they need a replacement tool. They need something like they can't just ditch add-ons without replacing it with something else. So either way, we can discuss all we want. Ain't nothing gonna happen. Blizzard has there's absolutely no chance Blizzard's gonna do anything in Dragonflight that has to do with add-ons. That's for sure. They can keep discussing it, but it's not gonna happen. Anyways, thanks for watching.